Afternoon, committee. We are at Legislative Post-Audit. Welcome. And I wanted to remind our committee and everyone that we are live streaming right now. And also remember to turn on your microphone when you are talking. Thank you to the Hospital Association for providing lunch. Thank you, Senator Tyson, for arranging that. And this is your last day to arrange those lunches. All right. And of course, thank you to Chris Clark, who is our new executive running the audit here at the State House. So awesome. This is her first official meeting. We'll go ahead and begin with the study of taxation and exemption, and I would like to recognize Heidi.
Good afternoon. This is the taxation and exemption audit. The team members for this audit were Cade Graber and Matthew Fahrenbrook, and Kristen Rottinghouse was the audit manager. The audit has one question, as what are the economic impacts of tax or exemption differences for government and nonprofit organizations that compete with similar for-profit businesses? And the short answer to that long question is that we could not determine the effect of taxes or tax exemptions because of data limitations. I'm going to talk first about the work that we were able to do, and then I'll provide some more details about the problems that we encountered. We started by trying to understand how government, nonprofits, and for-profit businesses compete with each other. We reviewed several studies that evaluated competition between government, nonprofit, and for-profit businesses in the United States. And we looked for the most recent research available. However, most of the studies we reviewed are at least 15 years old because this is an area where very little new research is being conducted. But based on the available research, competition between government, nonprofit, and for-profit businesses may exist in some industries, but it is likely minimal. And this is because they offer different types of services and serve very different customer bases. So for example, one of the studies we reviewed was a study of fitness centers, and it suggested that there was little competition between for-profit and nonprofit fitness centers. This was in part because for-profit and nonprofit centers focused on different types of customers. Nonprofits focused more on services that low-income households valued, like after-school care. However, for-profit fitness centers focused more on serving the needs of health-conscious customers and providing the services that they valued. And we found similar results across multiple industries, such as hospitals and substance abuse centers. But much of the research that we reviewed evaluated only very specific industries. And so we cannot draw any conclusions about the competition between government, nonprofit, and for-profit businesses, generally speaking, or even in other industries. Next, we looked at the research to understand whether government or nonprofits have any competitive advantages over for-profit businesses. And a competitive advantage is a factor or an attribute that allows a company to provide a good or service at a lower price or a higher quality point than its competitors. And some advantages, such as things like more efficient production strategies or good leadership, come from how a business chooses to operate. But other types of advantages can be conferred by government on that business. And that can include things like tax exemptions or regulatory exceptions. And a competitive advantage has many potential effects. So for example, a business with an advantage might gain greater market share or stay in business longer. So we looked at the existing research to understand the effect of government or nonprofit advantages on for-profit businesses. And again, most of this research was at least 15 years old. But what we found in the research is on the bottom of page 3. So first, the research that quantifies the effect of tax exemptions and those advantages is limited. The two studies we reviewed focused on tax exemptions for nonprofit businesses. They both found that tax exemptions do provide an advantage. However, the effect of that advantage was mixed. Second, some research found that government and nonprofit businesses have other more general competitive advantages, but the effect on for-profit businesses varied from industry to industry. Third, another study found that nonprofits' primary advantages were not conferred by government, so things like tax exemptions. That study found that the primary advantage of nonprofits is their ability to offer services at lower prices because they do not need to make a profit. However, that advantage can have a negative effect on for-profit businesses because the lower prices that a nonprofit may be able to offer can reduce the viability of other for-profit similar businesses. So the research that we looked at, of course, is national, and we wanted to look more specifically at Kansas, and we started by looking at tax rates. So we looked at the differences in statutory tax rates in 3 industries in Kansas. That included fitness centers, daycare centers, and mental health centers. And we chose these industries specifically because in many parts of the state, government, for-profit, and nonprofit businesses exist in close proximity, and they may offer some similar services. So the figure on page 5 shows the details of what we found. But overall, we found that in Kansas, for-profit fitness, daycare, and mental health centers generally pay taxes that similar government and nonprofits do not pay. We also tried to determine the effects of tax exemptions in Kansas, but we ran into several problems. So first, we lack the information and the time to fully assess which for-profit industries compete with nonprofits and government. We also ran into several data problems. First, how much a single business pays in taxes is not always clear. For example, a business incorporated as an LLC does not pay a corporate income tax. Instead, income from those businesses is taxed on the owner's individual tax return. And as a result, it's difficult to know how much of the tax on that return was related to the relevant business. Second, we have limited authority to audit the private sector, and we cannot compel private entities to provide information to us. As a result, we had difficulty getting the necessary information from nonprofit and for-profit businesses. Third, we tried to collect tax data by various industries, but the codes that allow us to do that are too broad. So for example, the code that fitness centers use also include businesses such as karate and gymnastic centers, skating rinks, and swimming pools. And the variation in those businesses is simply too broad to be useful. We also tried to gather some information through a survey. However, only 15% of the businesses or government entities that we surveyed submitted a complete survey. Most survey recipients are in the private sector, and so we cannot require them to submit a response. Because the response rate was so poor, we cannot draw any conclusions from the survey that we conducted, but respondents did report a few interesting things, and those are on the bottom of page 7. But one of the more interesting things they reported, or that we saw, was that respondents disagreed about how much nonprofits and governments compete with for-profit businesses. Only 58% of nonprofit and government respondents reported that they compete with similar for-profits. But 82% of for-profits thought they competed with similar government and nonprofits. And this lack of clarity about where competition does or does not exist was also reflected in the research. So to conclude, this is a large and complex question that does not have a robust or reliable answer at this time. Even in the research, there is a real lack of information on the effect of tax exemptions on competition. But this doesn't mean that there is no information. The national research does shed some light on the issues of competition and competitive advantages. Unfortunately, the limits on our audit authority and the lack of meaningful tax data means that we cannot reliably quantify the effect of tax exemptions in Kansas. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Heidi. Committee questions? Yes, Senator Corson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just want to make a point that, the proposed policy that has been the basis for this audit, this property tax rebate for businesses that allegedly compete with governmental or nonprofit entities. This has been floating around the legislature now for several years. Never made a lick of sense to me. It never made a lick of sense to a lot of us, which is why it never passed. So now, in my mind, we've wasted a lot of taxpayer money. We've wasted the time of our really talented and award-winning audit staff. And so now, having received this report, my hope is that we can finally just stick a fork in this bad idea and we can just be done with it. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I would note that in my 8 years in the legislature, it has been ongoing discussion, especially in tax committee. So I think that regardless of what the outcomes are of audits, it's good information. It is always good to find out what side we're on. And in some cases, it's not really complete or conclusive. Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would echo your comments. It is not complete or conclusive. It is disappointing that we were looking to and understanding the difficulty of getting the research. But I think we need to find alternative ways of pursuing this question. Because, and nothing against post-audit, you guys, I know you work hard and do what you can with the resources that you have available. So we need to check other resources and find other possibilities because this is a real problem. And as you stated in the report, they do have an advantage and they can lower the price and therefore could at some point realistically put a for-profit business out. It doesn't make sense, and the former tax chairman used to say this, if it's a government, it should be a government function if nobody else can do it. But if private industry can do those resources and take care of that service, then why is government participating in it? So I think it's a much broader question, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the audit and the committee. Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Senator Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My perspective of this, we should always be looking at these issues to see what we can learn. In my community, it was important to hear some of the comments because we built a community center a few years ago with taxpayer money bonded. It's being used really well. Got several local businesses. I'm still a little bit concerned because where I go to church, big, large field, it would probably be a lot of future business tax base. As we were pulling out on Sunday, they've graded it. Guess what? We're building a new community center on this side of town now. And so I don't know if we can really judge. I think every community is different, but I think what's right, I don't know. Maybe I need to just get in the community center and get a membership or something. But thank you.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The main emphasis, I've been on tax for, this will be my 6th year, and really the main emphasis on the not-for-profit versus governmental agencies, as the Senator had mentioned earlier, it has come up in tax. But last year there was the big push. The big push in tax was an amendment to exempt health clubs from property tax. And I don't, I guess, have a problem. Anybody can come forward and introduce or ask for an amendment on a bill. My concern, or the question I think that we all have to ask ourselves is when you just look at, and I know the audit tried to expand that, but if you get into really government versus for-profit, the list goes on and on and on, from trash services to golf courses. I mean, my goodness, where does it go? But I will just get back to the main point, which is, for example, health clubs. Before they go into a city and open up a health club, they should do their due diligence to see what kind of competition they do have. and they ought to have a business plan. And if they can't make it, they don't open up. I mean, it's pretty simple, I would think. And I would just point out in Topeka, over the last 2 years, we've had multiple health clubs open, and they're thriving and doing very well. So I'm not sure how much competition they're getting from the Ys, et cetera, but they seem to be doing very well here in Topeka. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would echo the comments of the Vice Chair that it is a problem. It's something we've got to continue, whether or not it's a property tax issue or just trying to figure out how, government is competing against these private businesses. It is a disadvantage. I mean, they're paying for their competition through their taxes to compete against them. It just seems like an unfair playing field, and whether or not the property tax issue is the right way to address it, I think it is. It's good to have this. I understand that it's a difficult thing to quantify, but to me, it's fairly intuitive. If you're paying for your competition to compete against you, it's just not a good deal. So I appreciate your work in this. I think it would have been interesting to see something on citing, because I know in my particular district, we've got community centers, and fortunately, some were rejected because of the cost, and that there were some other health clubs around. So I think the health club issue just kind of illustrates a broader picture that government should not be where it should not be. It should not be competing against the private sector. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
All right, committee, we have a couple more minutes before we want to wrap up this section of our agenda today, but we do have officials from the Department of Revenue here. Is there anyone that would like to ask a question on our committee? Oh, I'm sorry. Question for Revenue on WebEx, Senator Corson.
Oh, sorry, no, I don't have a question for revenue.
Okay. Senator Tyson, did you have a question for Revenue?
Just a statement if they would.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would ask Revenue just to clarify for those that aren't aware, the different tax breaks for government, nonprofit. Obviously, government doesn't pay any taxes. Nonprofit, which taxes do they pay? And then what do for-profit businesses pay? Thank you. I know the answer.
Okay, generally nonprofits do not pay property tax. On sales tax, it depends on if they have filed for an exemption and have been approved by the legislature, and there's either the sales tax that when they purchase something or when they sell something. So they can be separate. They can have one and not the other. Is that correct, Senator?
Madam Chair, yeah, that is absolutely correct. I just wanted to clarify so that people that are listening may not realize what type of advantage, and it can be a major advantage for a government versus a for-profit. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I just add from former days in tax committee, we always had this desire to get a hold of those sales tax exemptions and trying to make it more manageable, more fair, because we all know that if the more exemptions, it's just going to raise the rate, or we just need to stop spending, one of the two.
Right, and there can be income tax exemptions also. Thank you, Madam.
Very good point. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Heidi, for providing an overview. If you have additional questions regarding this audit, please seek out Heidi or Chris and get those questions answered. The next item on our agenda is we have a presentation from the Department of Commerce on economic development. We've allotted, welcome, Lieutenant Governor Toland. We've allotted 20 minutes for Department of Commerce to provide an overview, and if it's less than 20 minutes, we'll have time for questions. Welcome.
Hello, thank you, Madam Chair and Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Bob North. I'm the Chief Counsel at the Department of Commerce. I've got with me today Rachel Willis, who's our Director of Legislative Affairs, and Paul Hughes, who's our Deputy Secretary for Business Development. And we appreciate the opportunity to speak to our incentive programs today. We've got many programs to go through, so I will do so rather briefly, but we do appreciate all of the tools that the legislature has provided us and hope that we're being good stewards of the programs and enjoying a lot of success. In 2021, the state of Kansas had an unprecedented successful year in attracting capital investment. We had 321 successful projects. The capital investment that's associated with those projects is $3.78 billion, which is by far the strongest year that the state has had in attracting capital development to the state. And that kind of, the year before, we had broken the record at that point. It was 1.3 billion more than the year before. So the last few years, thanks to the tools that we've got in place, we've really enjoyed unprecedented success. You can see some of the numbers on the slides, but 40,000 jobs created or retained over the past few years, $7.6 billion in capital investment. And again, this is only possible because we've got tools that are competitive with the states that we are working against to bring projects to Kansas. It's important, and there's a slide, I think it's slide 4. You know, we're looking to grow the state's economy both in the urban parts of the state as well as in the rural parts of the state. The state's only going to prosper to the extent that we're able to develop the entire state. We've been pretty successful at that over the past few years. If you see 3 years ago, we did projects in 33 counties. 2 years ago, it was 43 counties. Last year, we did projects in 63 counties. So you see an escalation there of efforts across the state, and that's an emphasis for us. Also, this past year, we received the Area Development Magazine's Golden Shovel Award, which means we were at the very top of state's economic development programs. And we're pleased with that. You know, we still know we've got more work to do, and we appreciate your partnership as we try to achieve that. There's some discussion in the handout about why businesses choose to locate in a particular state. You know, incentives are part of that puzzle, but they're not the only thing driving that. You've got to have good workforce. You've got to have quality of life. You've got to have infrastructure, logistics. You know, Kansas, you know, with the pandemic in particular, we're well suited to, both from a kind of geographic aspect, to take advantage of some of those opportunities. And we think that's part of the reason that the growth has been as strong as it has these past few years. We've got to continue to develop quality of life attractions, and we can talk about star bonds here a little bit later, but we've got to keep our people here. We've got to keep our young people here, and that's going to be critical because Kansas needs more people. We've got more jobs open, and we have residents looking for work, so we've got to grow our talent pool. So the first program that I'm going to speak to is the Hpip program, Promoting Employment Across Kansas. It is our primary economic development incentive. It is a program that allows the state to reimburse employers for their new jobs up to 95% of their withholding tax. And typically, we don't award 95%, but that's the max that we can do. It's a really important tool. It's for net new jobs to the state. This is not for job retention. This is to bring new business. So as you can see, in 2021, 43 new agreements with Peak, roughly 3,300 Peak jobs and $1.25 billion in capital investment. So also important to note that we don't incent every one of those jobs, and nor do we incent each job to the fullest capacity. So the return on investment for Peak based on prior analysis by legislative post-audit is over $2.4 billion. So really strong program. There's 9 or 10 slides that detail the specific projects that participate in Peak. That information is also available on our transparency database. So I'm going to keep moving through this. Would highlight one of these Peak projects is Applequist Manufacturing in Smith Center. They took a vacant building, 138,000 square feet, and manufacture agricultural and industrial equipment using like state-of-the-art technology. So that's 90 jobs in Smith Center. Company's going to invest over $6 million in 5 years. The Peak incentive was $300,000. So you can see how Peak can be leveraged to create significant capital investment and job creation. And that's what we're all looking for. Moving on to Hpip, it's the High Performance Incentive Program. It's an investment tax credit of 10% of your business's qualified capital investment into a facility. The company has to pay a higher than average wage to those employees. And then the tax credit is, there were some legislative changes last year, but the tax credit can be used for up to 16 years. It can be carried forward against the taxpayers' Kansas income tax liability. In terms of process, real briefly, the Department of Commerce certifies that a company is eligible, that it meets the Hpip requirements. We transfer that eligibility certification to the Department of Revenue, and then once the building or the equipment is placed into service, then the business claims the tax credit on their income tax return. So there's almost always going to be a lag between the time that the application for Hpip is made and then when the asset's placed into service. You probably recall, many of you do, last session we made a couple of really substantial and useful changes to Hpip, and those involve the transferability of up to 50% of the Hpip credit. That's important because in the past there's a lot of taxpayers that simply never have the income tax liability to fully utilize the Hpip tax credit. So the law was changed to allow those companies to transfer or sell up to 50% of that tax credit, which we think is a great benefit. The other change was that previous to last year, in order to participate in Hpip, a business had to use either our Kansas Industrial Training or our Kansas Industrial Retaining program. And so we were getting lots and lots of training applications when the company really didn't need the training. All they wanted was to be able to be eligible for Hpip. So legislature disconnected those two concepts. So now we're able to use our training dollars, excuse me, for companies that actually need training and and then they can utilize Hpip for, the investment tax credit, the purposes that it was intended for. So we think those were positive changes and let us allocate our resources much better. You'll see in the packet, there's a summary of applications and certifications. A lot of these Hpip companies are large capital investment. There's 6 of them that make up, almost $2 billion of the proposed capital investment. Those companies are identified. Again, it's important that our programs are used across the state, so you'll see, Cherokee County, Ellsworth, Finney, Harper, Johnson, Wyandotte, Sedgwick. So you'll see that those programs are in fact used across the state by a mix of urban and rural companies. Next on the list is the Rural Opportunity Zone program. It was enacted in 2012 with the goal of bringing more people to our rural parts of the state. And there's 2 pieces to that. There's a student loan repayment component that's administered by Commerce, and then an income tax waiver that the Department of Revenue works on. It's been expanded multiple times over the past few years. There's 95 counties now eligible to participate in ROZ, and that the demarcation is counties with a population of less than 40,000 people. As you can see, we've got 4,200 applicants, 1,874 in the student loan portion to that, and there's some information on the state income tax waiver. The average tax credit was $3,700 per filer. And again, there's a map that shows the kind of distribution of ROZ participants. So moving on to the Job Creation Fund, we call it JCF. It's our deal closing fund. It is what we try to bring to those projects where we need a little something extra to close the deal, and we don't use it very much. Last year, we had 16 projects that used JCF. We heard earlier, I think we had 321 successful projects, so you can see the fact that we rarely use JCF. It's not a routine part of our incentive proposals, and we try to be very frugal with its usage. We've adopted new processes for JCF over the years. We've got a team of staff that review those. This is not one person sitting in a room making decisions on these funds. We typically distribute the money pursuant to a milestone arrangement where you get 20% of your money once you create, 25% of your jobs. As you hit the milestones, we release more money so that the state's getting what it wants to receive. 16 awards last year, roughly $9.5 million. Again, the ROI on JCF is almost $40 to 1. So again, a really, really positive return on investment of those funds. Kansas industrial training and retraining are obviously training programs. Training is aimed at new jobs coming to the state and teaching those skills that are going to help attract those jobs to Kansas. The retraining program is to give existing employees new skills so they can meet a change in the marketplace, or if a company's got to pivot to, manufacture PPE and its employees need new job skills, then we would make some industrial retaining benefits available to them. We did close to 80 Kit Kerr projects last year. which is a little bit down from previous years, and we think that's due to COVID for one, and also funds were less, but still a good program, and we continue to see a lot of demand for that program. Moving on, Community Development Blackrap Program, that's CDBG, that's a federally funded program. It's primarily available to cities with a population of 50,000 or less, and think about libraries, water projects, sewer projects, senior centers, designated at low to moderate income individuals within that community, and we use a competitive scoring matrix. We've always got more demand than we have capacity with that program. So it's a rigorous process, and like I said, we've always got more need than we have funding. On slide 34, there's a list of the awardees, and it looks like we did a little bit more than 14 million in CDBG benefits last year. Continuing on our quest, Community Service Tax Credit Program. This is a program that's 25, 26 years old, and it gives nonprofits an opportunity to enhance and improve their capital fundraising. We get an allocation of a little over 4.1 million. That is multiplied by capital investment from the donor. So for me to get, if I give you $100 to your nonprofit, then I get a 50% tax credit, but it leverages private investment, several times, by a multiplier of probably 4 or 5. So,
Bob, I'm going to slip in here. If you could kind of wrap up in a couple minutes, then that gives us a couple minutes for questions. That'd be great.
perfect. Slide 36 shows the CSP projects that were awarded, their distribution across the state. Sales tax and revenue bonds, star bonds, everybody's probably familiar with those. We amended that program, or you amended that program extensively last session. We think those amendments are really going to help us. They're going to help us track visitors better to these attractions, which is important to all of us. It also changes how the feasibility studies are handled, which we think will lead to better information on the front end of these projects to help us in our analysis as to whether to fund a particular project. Kansas Angel Investor Tax Credit Program helps startup companies. It's a 50% tax credit, and we amended it last year and also improved that program. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Well, hold on for a minute. Is there anyone on our committee here today that is not part of Commerce, because you get first dibs at the 2 questions? Because everybody else will see you again, Bob. Anybody have a question on the overview? Yes, Senator Thompson.
I used to be on Commerce, but no longer. So it seems like just kind of scanning a lot of these programs like the KIT and the KER and all these investment programs, there really are the bigger, as you mentioned, companies are the ones able to take advantage of that. Are there any things in here in this package that we could gear a little more toward startups, small businesses, and things like that would help them?
Yep. That's a great question, and the answer is yes. We are doing a lot, but we need to do more. We've got the Angel Investor Tax Credit Program that I just referenced. It is directly intended to hit the proof of concept kind of startup businesses across the state. We, for our larger programs like Peak, if you're in an urban area or a rural area, you got to have 5 new employees. So, in rural Kansas, 5 jobs could be a lot, but we do need more tools for startup businesses, and we've got the Center for Entrepreneurship. We've got the state has got some other programs kind of directed at those types of businesses, but we do need to do more. Sure.
Thank you, Bob. Are there any suggestions you might have with regard to changes in regulation for startup businesses that might remove some impediments for them? I mean, in a small community, 5 employees, that's a fair-sized employer. You know, some guys starting a new business, you know, can't afford to hire anyone for a while. So I didn't know if there's any of those things you've reviewed that we could change and again, make it easier for businesses to start up and get going.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any right this moment, but I do know that with, again, the Angel Tax Credit Program, it was modified last year to make it a little more accessible so that the kind of the realm of eligible companies was expanded a little bit, and we'll keep thinking of opportunities to work on that because it is important. I agree.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, and our final question is from Senator Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last year when we were doing a lot of these bills, the ones we were redoing, on every bill, we kind of put a little packet together, star bonds that showed each individual and how much sales tax, how much everything it's bringing. I think that would be good for the committee, how many jobs, how much investment it brings, not only what the project, the state's side of it, but what the private side's investing and the jobs and so the real, if you guys would take a look at that and when you bring them incentive bills, I think we just bring a cheat sheet on each one. I think you'd really help sell your store because you guys are doing a pretty good job over there. You just, you're not marketing it quite good enough.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we've got our kind of statewide annual report, I believe, is completed, and then within the next week, we will have our Star Bond annual report will be finished, and we can do a better job of explaining when we come to committee, talking about the return on investment and the jobs and capital investment.
You might talk to David Sulfur and see who was doing that for him, but they did a really nice job, and when I laid that out, it was really easy to explain to the Senate, what these bills really do, and they really help businesses in this state. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bob, and I look forward to asking my questions in commerce, so see you soon. All right, everyone, we're going to move on to our consent calendar items. They are tab B, and have Kristen go over that with us.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Fortunately, this is pretty short today, so there's only 2 items on the consent calendar for you all. The first of those 2 things is approval of the minutes from the December 16th meeting of 2021. And then the second thing is acceptance of the performance audit that Heidi presented today, which is the tax and exemption study. So just a reminder to you all, unless there is objection from the committee, both items will be considered approved. Members who weren't around for that December 16th meeting are able to abstain from the vote if that's what you choose to do.
All right, thank you, Kristen. Any objections? Any abstaining? All right, then the minutes are approved as is. Thank you. The next item is committee organization, and Chris, if you'll walk us through that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee organization is in the committee rules, which are in tab C in your notebooks. It's Committee Rule 4-1, which is also implementing a state law, which reflects the general premise that the committee elects a new chair each year. So how it works this year, we are in an even numbered year. So the chair would come from the Senate. The vice chair needs to come from the other house, so the House. And then you will be electing a final 3rd executive committee member. And just a reminder, no more than 2 of the 3 members can be of the same party. So, Madam Chair, usually how it works is you would solicit nominations for chair, the committee votes, and then move on to vice chair, and then move on to the executive committee member.
All right, thank you, Chris. So committee, do we have recommendations for chair? Senator Thompson.
I would nominate Senator Tyson as chair.
All right, do we have a second? seconded from Representative Barker. Further discussion? Representative Topliker.
I'd like to nominate my Senator Rob Olson.
Is there a second? Okay, there is a motion and a second. All right, so we have two that are wishing to be chair or nominated for chair. So would we then, Chris, take the first individual, or do we do ballot, or? All right, so we'll go ahead and do that. All those in favor of Senator Tyson for chair, please raise your right hand. And so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and all those in favor of Senator Olson, right hand. All right, the motion is 5-4. And so that means that Senator Olson is our next chair, if I'm doing my math correctly. All right. For the next item, we need to change seats, or I to go ahead and finish? Okay. All right. For the next item is for our vice chair, Representative Barker.
Thank you. I represent our distinguished Johnson County Representative, Representative Tockley.
All right. And for a second on the motion? Okay, Olson, second on the motion. Representative Gardner.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. You know, this is a unique committee. It's nonpartisan, supposedly. We support the post auditor and their function, and that is a nonpartisan entity. So with that in mind, I'd like to see, since the rules state that we can, it just needs to be a senator this year and vice chair representative, I would like to nominate someone that's been on this committee 20 years and brings a lot of experience, and that's Representative Burrows.
And let's double check the committee rules. Is that consistent with committee rules? Okay, consistent with committee rules. So Tom Burrows. All right. So we have two. So we have a second. We've got a second from Representative Burrows. All right, committee, we'll go ahead and proceed to the vote. All those in favor of vice? Yes.
Can we not make comment here?
Yes.
Thank you.
Please do. Representative Barker.
Thank you. I appreciate my distinguished colleague for making the nomination. You know, I've had Representative Burrows as my vice chair when I was chair of this committee, and he's correct. We've always strived to work nonpartisan, and I think we've done a good job of that. And I think Representative Burrows recalls when we were doing elections on audits that I always come to him and say, what do you guys need? And I always try to accommodate that. However, when the legislature created this committee, they did set the standard as to the majority party and the minority party. And that's the reason we have one more, I believe, one more member than the minority party. I'm not saying it would not be a bad idea to have divided, but I think the approach would be is to go back into the legislature and have a bill passed that would do that, and possibly take one member off or add another member so they're evenly divided. That would be the proper way of doing that. I think with that, I'll make no other comments other than I think we do have two distinguished representatives that could do the job, but it was created, the committee was with an odd number, and the majority party was given an additional vote. With that, I'll
Representative, a substitute motion is in order if you'd want to make one.
I'll make no substitute motion. I'll let the votes go where the votes go.
Representative Gardner.
Just one more time. Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand Representative and his comments, but it would seem to me that we're directed, and I don't know how this committee why it became political, because it should be nonpartisan, since we support legislative post-audit. And it would seem to me, since we appoint the post-auditor, and we just did in December with Chris, that I think we could do anything we want to if we change the rules. Don't we abide by our own legislative post-audit rules? So, I mean, that would be something, if we're serious about dealing with this, that the new chair might entertain a subcommittee or someone appoint a subcommittee to work in the interim to come up with fair rules and be nonpartisan. I could see really where this committee could go, the 6 Democrats and 6 Republicans. So just for what it's worth, those are my comments.
If
Representative
I may
Barker.
respond, I would agree, but that would be the process to go through the legislature who created this committee. And I've been on it 10 years, not as long as Representative Burrows. I was just in grade school when he came on it. But, and he's been my ranking member a number of times, and he's great to work with. And, you know, people should vote their consciences always. And I would have no problem with that.
And Madam Chair, just one quick to the representative's point. I mean, that's where we follow the rules, and the rules don't say it has to be a Republican or a Democrat. It just says a House member and or a senator. So,
Senator Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As like John, I've served with you, and you know, and you were our ranking back when I was chair several years ago, Representative Burrows. But I served with you 6 years in the House. I've also got my local representative who I've known a long time. So you know, this is a tough vote. I don't know that I'm making a partisan vote. I think I'm making a vote. You know, I've known John a long time too, and I definitely think we should look into this more, and I would definitely entertain, I think maybe some of us could get together and talk about how to form a subcommittee to look forward to deal with this, okay? So with that, that's my comments. Thank you.
And I just know as your chair that will be leaving this seat, and glad to do so, and thank you for the opportunity for sitting here. It is disappointing to see our vice chair undercut at the last moment. It is, when she didn't have any knowledge of it. Typically, traditionally, it is the process. Yes, I understand there's a vote, so we don't have to go back and forth. You get this, and you get this really soon, and you'll be able to manage it. I just wanted, as we're going around having this discussion about this process, I just wanted to say that, you know, we are colleagues. And so did it matter that much to do that? She's absent.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Representative.
My last comment today, I want to thank you for serving. You've been a great chair. You know, and I've sat in that chair twice in the last 10 years, and it can be difficult. But you've done an excellent job navigating us through all the different audits that most of us don't understand until we get somebody to explain or ask questions of. But I know you're not going to be chair, but you're always a very good member of this committee. And I think you have worked bipartisan this year. And I want to just thank you for that.
All right, well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I know we'd all do our best to work together and give and take. And so in difficult situations. So we do have 2. If there's not any further discussion, all right, committee, then we have 2. All those in favor of Representative Topliker, please raise your right hand. The vote is 5. And all those in favor of Representative Burrows. And the vote is 4. So a switch, we do have Representative Topliker that will take the vice chair position. Congratulations. Congratulations, Senator Olson, for being our newly elected chair. So I think with that, We just have the next meeting announcement. Oh. Oh, yes, sorry. All right, so now we need to take nominations for executive committee member from the.
Make that nomination.
Yes, Representative.
Distinguished colleague, Representative Burrows.
Do we have a second? We have a second from Senator Olson. Further discussion? All right, sounds good. All those in favor of Representative Burrows, raise your right hand. All right, hey, unanimous. No opposition. We do have our next executive member, so congratulations, officially. Jumping the gun, as I always do. Now, to additional business. Where do we switch? Just wait. Okay.
Okay, just two quick items to go over with you guys. At the last meeting, you may recall, when Kristen was talking about the follow-up process, we mentioned that 3 counties we had not been able to get a hold of regarding their recommendations from the county procurement audit. And the committee had talked about writing a letter to them from the committee. I just wanted to update you, immediately following the meeting, the Association of Counties reached out to us and helped us, and we were able to quickly resolve getting a hold of those counties. It was really just a matter of staff turnover in the county, some miscommunication, that sort of thing. So they have all responded, they are all working on their recommendations, so we are not going to pursue writing the letter at this point. The only other item of business is in tab D. If you want to take a look, we have a lot of audits coming your way this spring, so we will be scheduling a few meetings. New Chair Olson and I will be working together. We have performance-based budgeting coming up. We have IT security audit of judiciary. We have a foster care audit coming in February, economic impact statements, K through 12 remedial education, and economic development evaluation of the IRBX program. And then coming a little later, possibly March timeframe, we have some limited scope audits on the driver's license program, Department of Commerce, social workers in K through 12 schools that you just approved at the last meeting. We have an audit on CARES Act funding, IT security service consolidation, and the normal follow-up audit that we do each year. So there will be a few meetings that we need to have between now and April, but I will be working with the new chair and we will get some dates. They will always be Wednesdays at noon in this room.
All right, committee, we are adjourned.